Thank you for that. And I will say, you guys probably aren't here to see me. You're here to see somebody else. Is anybody really familiar with who we're going to see? Yes. Okay, good, good. In that case, I'm not going to bother going through too much of the credentials. I'm just going to say, can we get a warm Pensacon welcome for Aurelio Voltaire? I swear he's right out there. Do you know there's no coffee shops in downtown Pensacola today? Just so you know, I had to ship out to Brazil to get this. Really. Yeah. He's back there enjoying the last of it. Oh, come on out. Once again, warm welcome. Nice seeing you. Nice seeing you. Thank you.
Daniel, don't be an unprofessional. Don't touch the mics.
You like that?
Sit back, relax. In their general direction, they will pick up your voice. I felt that I should tell you this.
Yeah, I have to admit, I particularly enjoy the certain amount of snark from the sound guy, so I'm going to say, hey, right there. I will not go, this is on, but yeah, they seem to be pretty good. How's yours?
Well, they could have been snarkier. I mean, if they knew me better, they should have written no bottle of rum openly exposed on the table. And under all and any circumstances, keep your pants on.
And it doesn't say that, by the way.
It doesn't say that.
So, no Facebook Live, but free to take photos with no flash. Oh, thank you for coming out. Thank you for being here in Pensacola.
I haven't come out yet, actually. My parents still think I'm straight.
So sorry, so sorry. Well, one day, and I hope you'll do it here at Pensacon, whichever the way that particular door opens or closes. Have you been to Pensacon?
It's a revolving door.
And that should be the way. Have you been to Florida, particularly Pensacola, Florida, before?
Well, I've been to Florida many, many times, and I've been at other conventions in Florida, but this is my very first time at Pensacon, and more importantly, my very first time in Pensacola ever.
Yeah.
So be gentle.
Yeah. Have you had a chance to get out and see the sights at all?
No. I think one of the most common questions that I'm asked when I'm touring is like, so what do you think of our city? And I'm like, the airport's nice, the hotel is nice, the venue's nice.
Yeah. It's a very nice venue.
Although on the bright side, we are in the South, which means I can also say the grits at Waffle House are nice.
The grits at Waffle House. There's some other nice grits places around here, so if you have another chance. I have to say, to be honest, I traded out one of the other panels to be on this one. So I hope you don't mind. I am a little bit of a fan. I think I found you in '99, 2000, all the way back then. So, and really
so late.
surprisingly. But what's really kind of, I really knew you through the music. So let's just address that right there.
Okay.
How deep does your percentage go as far as fan base? Is it more on the music? Is there, because you've become so many things over the years.
Actually, music was not the first thing that I did, right? So my first career was as a stop motion animator. So when I was a very, very, very small child, I was living in actually Newark, New Jersey for starters, and then eventually the suburbs of New Jersey. But I did not fit in, and I was relentlessly bullied, and I found a tremendous amount of excitement in stop motion animation. You know, I saw the films of Ray Harryhausen, Jason and the Argonauts, Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, etc. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So I got a Super 8 camera when I was 10. I started making Super 8 films. And then at 17, honestly, the bullying had gotten so bad that it was, you know, on the verge of becoming fatal. Either I was going to be killed or I was going to kill myself. And I decided to get the hell out of that town. And I ran away from home. I went to New York City, where, you know, I mean, I look like normal and manly now. But back then, I looked like the sixth member of Duran Duran. And if I walked down the street in New Jersey, you know, people would literally throw rocks and garbage at me and call me all sorts of names. And then when my pointy boots touched New York City soil, or concrete, as we call it, everything changed. You know, people were like, wow, you have a great look. Will you be in my movie? You make stop motion animated films? That's fascinating. So all of the things that made me a social pariah in New Jersey made me who I really was in New York City, because people ultimately were more accepting in New York City. And so getting to the point, I had to find a job, and I had a girlfriend at the time, and she said, you should probably go find a job. And I was like, why? You're rich.
Let's get rid of it.
Yeah. She said, no, you should find a job. I said, all right, I'll go out tomorrow and I'll look for a job at a record store or something. And she said, Voltaire, you've been making stop motion animated films for literally 7 years. Go to an animation company. So I went to this company where they were making a show called Pee-wee's Playhouse, and I showed them my films, and they hired me almost immediately to, all of their stop motion animators were working on Pee-wee's, so there was no one left to do commercials. So at 17, I started animating Budweiser commercials for the Super Bowl, MTV station IDs, IKEA commercials, Kellogg's commercials. And so my very first career actually was as a stop motion animator. But like any child of the 80s who sat in front of a TV set and watched the very first transmission of MTV, I had aspirations of being a musician. And so I kind of secretly made music on the side until computer animation became so popular that I became obsolete around the age of 26, 27. So I was at the top of my game, was winning all sorts of awards as a director, and then all of a sudden the phone literally just stopped ringing. And I had lots of free time on my hands, and that's when I suddenly, there was this like void in my life, and there was this acoustic guitar in my apartment, and I picked it up and learned to play it. And so my musical career started officially in like 1995, 93, 94, 95. And so, and the music ultimately, because there's no credits on commercials, right? So like if I showed you my reel, if I had brought my DVD and showed you my reel, many of you probably would have gone, oh, I know that commercial. Oh, I remember seeing that on MTV. But there's no credits on any of that. So ultimately, the music is what people came to know me for.
But see, that's the part, like I said, known you for years for the music. And I started doing just a bit more research to say maybe I'll run out of things to talk about here.
Never.
I was shocked, very, very shocked in how ingrained in pop culture you really were. I mean, all the way, and you talk about MTV, you did some stop motion ID
IDs,
bumps. Yeah, I remember those.
And
I
some of the first Sci-Fi Channel station IDs.
Yeah. So,
and Nickelodeon and USA Networks, a lot of those.
So the two sides of that, because it really kind of has a start and a beginning apparently, is in an abusive scenario of New Jersey where it's not very open. How do you find this? I mean, YouTube wasn't what it was at all.
Oh no, I mean there was no internet.
Right.
There was no internet at all. So how do I find what?
How did you find, well, the tools, the resources to become, I mean, obviously Harryhausen's there,
right.
But how did you find school?
No, I
Did
mean,
you just go to the
I
library?
can't even begin to explain to you what a struggle life was before the internet. And granted, I also am very anti-internet in a lot of other ways. I'll tell you a very, very, very quick anecdote which I think kind of sums it up. I loved Ray Harryhausen, and I just tried to find any information I could about him. So I would go to the corner store and I'd buy like Famous Monsters of Filmland, Starlog, Fangoria. These are not how-to magazines, so I couldn't learn the craft that way. So I had to kind of figure it out on my own. But one night in like 1980 or 82 or 83, I was down in my creepy, basement bedroom with the red lights and the incense, and like any proper goth would have. And there used to be a show on Saturday nights, still the best block of programming, in my opinion, ever on television. It was called Night Flight. And Night Flight, it was 4 hours long, and they would show like a classic horror film like Frankenstein or Dracula, and then there would be music videos from these bands you never heard of from this far-off land called England, like Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees and Adam and the Ants, and then they would have weird short little stop-motion films. And I remember, back then, being a teenager, watching this and being so enthralled, and I would say, oh my God, this is 4 hours of everything that's cool. But now, as a cynical adult, I look back and I realize, oh, it was 4 hours of whatever they could get for free. Really, that's what it was.
Only for the time slot.
Exactly. But during that show, there was this snippet. There was this little stop-motion film. It was clearly from the turn of the century, black and white, silent film. And there's this stop-motion devil that stands up and he invites these people to this ball, and all of these monsters show up to dance at this ball. Like a fish skeleton assembles itself and goes in, and a chicken skeleton flies in, and there's all of these weird creatures dance. And I was just so mesmerized by this, and it was called the Devil's Ball, and there was no credit, and it was maybe 3 minutes long. That was in 1982, 83, and I spent the next 20 to 30 years trying to find out what that was. But imagine seeing something only once, and it's 3 minutes long, and it completely changes your life. Like, so I wanted to animate like that. I wanted my films to look like that. And in turn, my films did very much end up emulating this little tiny snippet of film from the turn of the century. And I was in Germany, and I was talking to animation scholars there. This guy, Ralph Giesen, who was Ray Harryhausen's manager at the time, pulled this dusty tome off a shelf and plopped it on a table and like dusted off the dust, and he opens it and he goes, "It's the Devil's Ball, let me see now. There's nothing here called the Devil's Ball." And he's like looking through the book. I almost literally went all over the world for decades, literally, trying to find out what this was. And one day, about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I opened up a newspaper, and there was this tiny little postage stamp-sized photo that I instantly recognized as being from the Devil's Ball. And it said, "The films of Ladislav Starovich, Russian animator from 1902, were lost forever. But they've recently been found by his great-granddaughter in the attic, and they've been restored. And they're being played in New Jersey with live musical accompaniment." So now this is like 25 years after I saw his work for the first time. And I was so excited that I was willing to go to New Jersey. Seriously. And I teach a stop motion class at the School of Visual Arts, and I tell my students all the time, would this happen today? Because, with the advent of the internet. And my answer is, I don't think so. Like, would you spend 30 years being so passionate about this fleeting vision that you would dedicate your life to finding out what it was, and your entire art would be motivated by it? And I think the answer is no, because now you see something and you go, "Oh, that was cool, what is that?" And you Google it, and then you watch it 2 or 3 times, and then you move on. So I think to a large degree, now I'm not saying that that's the right way or the wrong way, but to a large degree, there's some preciousness that has been lost with the immediate gratification of the internet.
Hard copy is a nice thing.
I do enjoy hard copies. I'm a fetishist.
Now, how did you feel about watching the demise, if you will, of stop motion, where the phones stopped ringing?
Well, I mean, nobody, I'll tell you a funny story. So I'm like 20, in my early 20s, I'm making thousands of dollars a week. I'm saving none of it because I'm in my early 20s. So this is a true story. I would literally get a check on Friday for a week's work, and it would be $4,000, $5,000. And I would buy a $4,000 Jean-Paul Gaultier sweater. Like that was the mentality of the 80s, and that was the mentality of this gravy train's never going to end. And also, I was doing what I loved. I mean, I was very, very satisfied as a person going to work every day, doing this thing that I love. That's so weird and obscure. But when the phone stopped ringing, things got really scary because I instantly couldn't pay my rent because I had no savings. I lived month to month, flagrantly and luxuriously, but month to month. So I had no savings. And within a month, I already couldn't pay my rent. And gosh, which one of these stories I'm going to tell? I'm going to tell 2 stories about Hasidic Jews in a row. That's really odd. But so my landlords, I really am. My landlords were Hasidic Jews. They were these 2 gentlemen, Orthodox Jews, I should say, Jack and Elliot. And after 2 months of not paying rent, I was afraid to go to their office where I would pay the rent because I didn't have the money. 3 months later, I get a note on my door. It says, "Voltaire, it's Jack and Elliot." I'm trying not to do the accent because it's so tempting. "Voltaire, it's Jack and Elliot. We haven't seen you in so long. We haven't seen you in 3 months. Are you okay? Please stop by the office." So I thought, well, my goose is cooked now because I have to go face them. I went down there and I said, I'm out of work. Nobody seems to want this particular art form anymore, and it is what I do for a living. And he looked me right in my good eye, and he said, okay, well, keep trying to find a job and good luck, and let us know when you have something and when you can start paying rent again. That would not happen today in New York City. So I went another 3 months. So I went 6 months without paying rent, and I finally found one obscure little weird stop motion job, and I made some money. And I went down there proudly to pay my rent, and I paid the month's rent, and I'm walking out with a big smile, and he goes, wait, hold on now, because you owe 6 months rent. And I thought, now I'm really screwed because I don't have the 6 months rent. And he said to me, look, you don't have to pay a particular amount extra every month. Just pay a little at whatever you can. Maybe 1 month it's $1,000. Maybe 1 month it's $5. Just pay a little extra every month. And over the course of the next year and a half, I caught up. And that's just one of my favorite stories from that time period because landlords are not perceived as being particularly generous. Well, ironically, I have another Orthodox Jewish story from the same period that really, really gets to the heart of the question you asked. So here I am, I'm like 24, 25 years old. I'm completely destitute. I mean, I really can't pay my rent. I feel so sorry for myself, and I'm not doing anything about it. I'm just waiting for the world to realize the huge mistake they've made and to get interested in stop motion animation again. So months are going by, and I'm just not changing my lifestyle. I'm just still trying to find stop motion work and feeling like the universe has really shafted me. And then I walked by the place I used to get my business cards printed. And it was this printing press on Broadway, Lower Broadway. And it was run by these 80-year-old Hasidic Jewish men. They were Hasidic Jews. And I remember walking by, and they were just sitting there, dejected, because now everybody had a desktop computer with these things called fonts attached to a printer. So now anybody at any time could design their own business card and press a button and print as many as they wish to at home. And I looked at them and I thought, they're in their 80s, I'm in my 20s. I should really stop fucking complaining and find something else to do. And that's what I did.
But ironically, if it is irony, you're now teaching it.
I teach stop motion animation. Yeah, in the school that I wouldn't say I got kicked out of exactly, but my plan, before running away from home, well, I applied to the School of Visual Arts in New York City, specifically to learn stop motion animation. This is a true story, though. It'll sound like I'm blowing smoke up my own ass. And if I could, believe me, I would. But I applied to the School of Visual Arts, and I got in. I started taking classes there. And my very first day of class, this teacher, this very particular fellow that I can't ever forget because he's still there, and I teach side by side with him. This was 36 years ago. But this gentleman, he looked at me, he said, well, why did you bring a projector to school? I said, well, I've made a whole bunch of stop motion films, and I thought, you might like to see my work. And he says, set it up, show the class. So I set up my projector, and I started showing my films to the class. And he kind of pulls me aside afterwards, and he goes, so why are you here? And I said, because you should go to college, right, and learn a trade or a vocation. He said, so you have on that reel what you're supposed to leave here with after 4 years and after tens of thousands of dollars. But I still felt it would be really, really helpful to be in an environment where I could avail myself to equipment and I was around other people excited about animation. But about 2 months into my schooling was when I had the last really, really violent throwdown with the parents. Because the bullying wasn't just at school, it was also at home. And it was violent, and I ran away from home. And I had a conversation with my stepfather, and he said, if you don't live in my house, I don't pay for your school. He's not a Hasidic Jew. And he's Cuban like myself. And he said, and I said, well, then I guess I no go to school. So after 2 months of going to the School of Visual Arts, I stopped going there, and that's at the point at which this girlfriend of mine encouraged me to go find a job in animation. So I got the job that you would get after 4 years of school and after 2 years of interning and after 3 years of assisting. Just And I guess here's the moral of the story. The moral of the story is, you know, we do still live in a world where there's education and there are skills.
Right.
And there's a very big difference between the two. I mean, if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to be a lawyer, you need to have a certain education, you know. You don't really want to have open heart surgery with some guy who's like, no, I swear I'm really good at this.
Read a lot about
I've done
it.
this like a million times at home. I just got so lucky that what my childhood hobby and passion was is something that allowed me to, over time, develop this skill that was useful. So after working in the animation business for several years and making a name for myself, that same school came calling and they said, hey, we'd like you to teach a class here. And I thought it was a prank. Like, I honestly thought it was a practical joke. But they were serious, and I have now been teaching stop motion animation, the dying art form of stop motion animation at the School of Visual Arts in New York City for 27 years.
Congratulations.
27 years.
Not bad.
Hard to believe. Now, if you do the math, that means I started teaching there when I was 3.
Do the math. So at one point though, you didn't have this, and you started doing music.
Right, well, you know, when stop motion died, actually music was not the next thing that I did.
Not.
It wasn't, no, I was a male erotic dancer for a while. Just kidding. Make it rain, baby, make it rain. Don't make me twerk up here, seriously. My goal, ironically, I made animated films in my home, and then I got so lucky to be doing it professionally. But guess what happens when you get to do it professionally?
Get paid.
Well, no, you don't do your own work. For years, I was animating, you know, dancing toilet paper rolls and football playing beer bottles for Budweiser and dancing chairs for IKEA. And this is what I did every day, and I was thrilled to be doing it. But it took years for me to realize, like, oh, I'm not making films. And I'm certainly not making my own films. So when the rug kind of got pulled out from under me, and I had spent some years sort of developing this project in my head called Chichan, about this, it's sort of a Cinderella story of this half Japanese girl who lives in New York City in the 31st century. After the New York-New Jersey War, we all knew what happened. And it's, you know, sort of like a biopunk, for lack of a better word. It's kind of a biopunk story. Steampunk is so yesterday. And so I was developing the story thinking it would someday be a feature film, and then when the bottom fell out of the stop motion thing, I thought, well, this can no longer be a movie. Like, now I'm never, ever going to find my way to a place where someone's going to give me $180 million to make this film. And then, believe it or not, I was reading an article, whether it was in the paper or on the internet, I don't remember, and it said that the easiest way to create an IP, right, an intellectual property. So like, for instance, Mickey Mouse is an intellectual property. He's a licensed character. The easiest way to create that and to have it exist in such a way that other people will know that it exists, and in such a way that you know, you can maybe sell the film rights, or et cetera, was to make a comic book. That's what it said. It said, if you make a comic book, then it's copyrighted, the story and the characters are automatically copyrighted. Now this world exists, and now maybe somebody will want to license it for toys, somebody will want to maybe make a feature film from it. And I thought, I've never read a comic book. But I'm pretty sure I could make one. How hard could it be? And so I was going to a cafe every night in New York City called Jaffa Cafe. It was 24 hours. I'd go at midnight with my sketchbook, and I'd open up my sketchbook, and I would begin to write and draw the first page of the Chichan saga. And then my goal was it would be finished by 8 a.m. Also not a really good working strategy. You know, if you're trying to make art, it probably shouldn't be, this has to be done in 8 hours. But I did that every night for weeks and weeks and weeks, and eventually I created this comic book that told her story. And by the way, never having read a comic book before, I didn't know what panels were. I didn't know about panels. So there's no panels in the Chichan comic book. There's no panels. you just kind of follow the action wherever it seems like your eye should go. And I don't know if you guys know Jonan Vasquez. He did Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. But when Jonan Vasquez and I met for the first time at San Diego Comic-Con, I said, oh, I'm a really big fan of your comic book. I said, have you seen my comic book? He goes, oh, that fucked up Rorschach test? I've seen it. Those are his exact words. I'll never forget it. And then I choked him.
It's nice that you find so many of your own unique genres.
And there is a photo of me choking him, incidentally. But that's what he said. So I made this comic book very naively, and then I shopped it around to comic book companies, and they, most of them looked at it and went, "There's no panels." And I was like, "Who needs panels? What are panels? I don't need them because I don't know what they are." And they were like, "Yeah, it should also probably be legible. Like, what? How did you letter this?" And I said, it's a font that I created myself. And they're like, you made an illegible font? But believe it or not, a publisher was interested in it, and it got published, and they said, you can't just put out one comic book, this has to be a series. So now go and write another 5 issues. Go write and draw another 5 issues. But Chichan dies at the last page of issue 1. So I was like, all right, guess she's coming back to life. So I started making this comic book. It was so liberating. Unlike stop motion animation, which requires sometimes, a huge studio and lots of money and expensive equipment, the only thing I needed to make a comic book was a pencil and a piece of paper. Literally. I would go to a cafe with a pencil and a piece of paper. And this is how I made my comic book. And it was so incredibly liberating to create worlds this way. And incidentally, folks, novels don't even require drawing. So on a daily basis, I swear to you, on a daily basis, I get emails from people. They say, you're a published author, you're a published comic book creator. How do I get my novel published? And I say, well, what's the name of your novel? Well, look, I haven't written it yet. Well, how much of it have you written? Well, none of it. Well, what else have you written? Well, nothing yet, but I have this idea for a novel and I want it to be published. And I tell them, what are you asking of me exactly? Do you need me to send you a pencil? Like, all you really need is a pencil to start. Anyway, so the point of the story was, it ended up being a 6-issue comic book series. I got so addicted to telling stories this way that I instantly pitched another series to the same publisher called Oh My Goth, which was in sharp contrast, a funny, ridiculous Gothic comic book. And then that led to another comic book series called Deddy. So before music, I actually was a comic book creator.
So, Deddy.
Yes.
Panels?
Panels. Oh, yes. Yes. By Deddy, I had, the world had beaten me down and made me conform to the idea of comic books being legible and entertaining. So yeah, there are comic books in Deddy. I loved it, and don't lie now, just really raise your hand if you've ever heard of Deddy, my comic book Deddy. Okay, thank you for those of you who have heard of it. I always say Deddy is the most famous comic book character you never heard of. Now, over the run of Deddy, there was 3 graphic novels. Neil Gaiman wrote a Deddy story. Clive Barker wrote a Deddy story. James O'Barr did Deddy Meets the Crow. Roman Dirge did Deddy Meets Lenore. Grizz Grimley did a Deddy story. David Mack did a page. Junko Mizuno did a page. Billy Tucci did She Meets Deddy. Like, it's insane how many high-profile artists were involved. I mean, I was easily the weakest link in the chain, in the Deddy world. And then it ended up getting licensed as toys to the point where there was something like maybe 25 different Deddy toys, including Hot Wheels cars. But no one has ever heard of Deddy.
Well, that was the shock thing. Again, do some extra research. I'm like, Deddy, what's Deddy? And then I said, I know what this is. I've seen this. So it's about how surprising, surface level, it's music, but really so much else that you've done that's been becoming ingrained in pop culture.
My very first licensing deal with Deddy was, so the comic book had been out and we had made some T-shirts and the T-shirts and the comic books were available in comic book stores, and it was not a huge hit, you know, it certainly wasn't Batman. And these kids kept showing up at because at this point I'm making music and playing shows, and folks are showing up with these little vinyl bears hanging from their belts and their knapsacks, and they were all different, you know, all different design, like same shape, different paint jobs. And I said, what is this? Like, oh, it's this new phenomenon called blank canvas, or, you know, urban toys or art toys. It's been so long now, I don't remember. But it was this new movement of these kind of art toys, and they were more often than not shaped like bears. So I got on the internet, I bought one, and I got on the internet and I Googled the company. And I sent an email like Donald Trump would at 3 in the morning. Like in some crazed, like, stupor. And I wrote to the company, I wrote, hi. And they were in China, Hong Kong, I should say. They were in Hong Kong. And I wrote, hi, my name's Voltaire. I'm the creator of this comic book series, this creator of this character called Deddy. Deddy is a bear, and your character is a bear, and I see that you're constantly getting different artists to redesign your bear shape. How do you feel about putting my bear design on your bear toy? And I get this email back like 5 minutes later and from the president, Raymond Choi, and he's like, I know your bear, he famous. That's what he wrote, like, I know your bear, he famous. And I wrote him back and I was like, how famous do you think this character is? And he's like, I see it every month in previews. And then the irony of previews is just a catalog that's sent to comic book stores to show what is available. And comic book stores can choose to order it or not order it. But just the simple fact that it was in the catalog, he saw it month after month, and he thought, this must be very successful. And I'm going to try to wrap the story up because I'm getting long-winded here, but he was the very first person to license the Deddy design to make a toy. We made a small little plastic Deddy vinyl toy that was on a keychain. And he said, we're going to make 500 of them, and we're going to sell them at San Diego Comic-Con. So his company had a booth, and he invited me to San Diego Comic-Con to come and sign them. And man, I kept telling this guy, I was like, you know, I'm a musician at this point, and you know, I play shows to several hundred people at a time. Like, I think a lot of people are going to come and buy this toy. And the reply that I got from him, or the vibe that I got from him, really was just that he had heard this kind of stuff all the time. Well, I fly to San Diego Comic-Con, and I show up, and I call him. I'm like, hi, I'm outside. You want to meet me outside? Bring out my badge. Our very first meeting, he comes out. It's a true story. He comes running out of San Diego Comic-Con. He goes, Mr. Voltaire, many kids wearing black are lined up to buy your toy. He was so shocked that it was true, and we sold all 500 of them that weekend at San Diego Comic-Con. And then more importantly, Tower Records, which was a very important entity at the time, and they had just gotten into making toys. The buyers from Tower Records come over and they see that we're selling toys, but that everybody online looks like they're into music, right? Because goth is a subculture, right? A musical subculture. And they're kind of standing there scratching their beards like, who is this guy? What is this thing? Like, why are all these rocker kids lined up to buy a vinyl toy? So they walked up to the booth and they said, we'd like 1,000 of those, but this big. Can you do that? And so my very next deal was for Tower Records. And then it just kind of took off from there. But apparently not enough that anybody knows what Deddy is. But
you need a name tag. I think that's what it is. Deddy needs a name tag. You make there's plenty of jokes going around these days about Donald Trump, and when you talk about music, particularly rock music, but goth, I think there's something said there. There's a certain sense of rebellion that goes into it, and I don't think there's any shortage of that in your music. And before I even get into the bigger picture of rebellion, just the simple idea of taboos that go into your songs. Have you had a line where you won't go to? How do you make that discretion? And what kind of blowback has there been at one point or another?
So you haven't heard Cantina.
I've heard Cantina. I've heard Cantina.
First of all, let me just touch on Trump for a second and say that, obviously he's a very colorful character, and I'm not going to express the full depth of my feelings about him because a lot of people here will disagree, and there's no need for this panel about art ultimately to get political. But I will say that when he was starting to look like he was going to win, a friend of mine said, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about him winning? I said, he wins, so do I. Because the worse the world gets, the more people need art. And ultimately, if you have somebody who's got that itchy of a trigger finger and somebody who's creating, who could potentially create as much strife as someone like he could cause, and let's face it, Hillary, lover or hater, kind of stood for, the freaks and the liberals and, and all of us weirdos. And Trump obviously seems a little bit more like a conservative guy, seems to be more interested in conservative values. So the more conservative a country becomes, as you all basically astutely pointed out, the more vital punk rock becomes. And I'm using punk rock as an umbrella term for everything rebellious. But so I just said to my friend, it doesn't really affect me, really. It just makes it easier for me to make a living. So Trump!
Any new albums planned?
He's definitely making America greating again.
So when you make that list, it's Comic-Con, so it's always a great origin stories in comic books, and so thank you already for what you've been providing. But when you made that transition into music, first album, I mean, did you go from a vinyl toy line to the record stores just because those guys were there, or
no, the music started first? I mean, it's because it's very confusing because it was animation. And then it was comic books.
Sure.
And then while I was making the comic books, I fell into music, and then the toys happened later. Right. So my album, so technically, my first album came out before the first comic book came out. So it's a little confusing. Oh wait, no, that's not true. My album came out in 1998. That's right. My first comic book came out in 1996. So the comic books came out first. Gosh, I don't remember the question anymore.
Oh, well, let me just rephrase it a little bit. And we'll go with, sure, you had hundreds of people at your shows, and you had all these things on the bubble going on, it was all there. And let's just say Billy and Mandy happened, right. An album happens, things are, so, well, even backing up even further, you were doing these commercials for a while and feeling pretty good about things. Was there a point where, or several points, where you said, I've made it, and this is...
Never, and I still haven't. Yeah. I never, and I still haven't. And I'm not trying to sound humble, but I had a very weird, really, really weird experience last. God, I'm going to tell you this one anecdote first.
And
then don't let I have so many anecdotes because my life is so weird and so many crazy things have happened. So I'm going to tell you one from 1987, and then hopefully I'll tell you the one about last night if I remember. Just remind me, Goth Club, but. So in 1987, I had directed my very first commercial, and it was an MTV station ID based on a painting by Hieronymus Bosch. It was the Garden of Earthly Delights come to life in stop motion. And at this point, again, because I was so poor at managing money, I was 19, I was a teenager, I was so poor at managing money, I would get my check and spend it, and then I wouldn't have money the whole rest of the week. Like, literally no money. I'd go into the studio and I'd just be drinking their coffee for free all day because it was all I could afford. Because I was wearing a $7,000 pair of socks, which seemed reasonable. So there was this one moment in 1988, maybe, where my very first directing commercial had been nominated for like the top award for station IDs. And the president of the company, let me back it up. So I'm in the shop building something for a commercial, and the shop had a plywood floor. And about 6 months earlier, some of us guys in the shop had glued a quarter to the floor. And we would sit there and watch the producers come in and take bets on who would try to pick up the quarter. Because, producers, that's what they do, right? They try to save every penny they can. And we would just kind of sit there and go like, all right, I got my money on Russ Dubé. How about you? He's like, no, I think Richard Rosser's going to pick up the quarter. And so we had glued this quarter to the ground. 6 months had passed, and we work in a shop where there's glue and sawdust and rubber and all sorts of stuff. So now I'm told, now I'm out of money. I want to buy a cup of coffee. And I'm like, where's that quarter I glued to the floor? I know it's in here somewhere. So I'm scraping around on the floor with a screwdriver trying to get through the gunk, right? And I find the quarter, and I'm scraping it away, and I can't get it up because it's glued so well. So I take a screwdriver and I take a hammer, and I'm about to hit this quarter so I can go get a cup of coffee, because in 1988, a cup of coffee was a quarter, literally. And so this producer walks, the president of the company walks in, he said, "Hey, Voltaire, congratulations." I said, "For what?" He said, "Your Hieronymus Bosch MTV Station ID has been nominated for an award." I said, "Wow, that's incredible." He goes, "Are you going to go to accept your award?" I said, "No, I don't. I can't afford to go to this, to the festival." He said, "We'll pay for everything." He's like, "We'll buy your ticket. You just get yourself there. We'll buy your ticket." I was like, "Really?" Bam! I hit the quarter, and the quarter goes flying up into the air, connected to like a big chunk of the wood that had come up with it. So I had like a Chinese star with a quarter in the middle. And that's how I was going to buy my coffee, on the way. So that's a moment right there in my life that ultimately has really been indicative of the whole rest of my life, where I make things, I love making things, I'm incredibly passionate about making things. I have been very, very, very lucky that some of these things are loved by other people other than myself. And in essence, that has created a scenario where if there's enough people who like an album or a book or a toy, I get to eat and I get to pay my rent. But my focus has always been on making the art. My focus has never been on amassing wealth. So I have none, right? And because of what I do is so niche-y, and I've never had the desire to say, I want to grow my fan base to the point where it'd be so big that I might be a millionaire, that would mean making art I don't want to make. In stop motion terms, it would mean going back to like animating dancing donuts. In music terms, who knows, right? So I've always just maintained myself in this weird little niche-y environment where I walk down the street and nobody stops me. And actually, that's not true. I get stopped maybe a couple times a week. Every time I'm in an airport, "Excuse me, I love your music. Can you please sign this for me, Mr. Navarro?" So, I get stopped, but
Did you sign, by the way?
I did sign John Taylor once, but it's a long story. But in my eyes, I am not famous. And in my eyes, I hesitate to say I'm not successful. To me, successful, the portrait of success is, I don't know, maybe my rent is paid ahead of time. My rent's never paid ahead of time. My rent's always paid the day it's due. But I would say, in another regard, that I view myself as remarkably successful in that I wake up every morning at 4 p.m. I go get a cup of coffee. I kind of figure out either what I want to do that day or what needs to be done that day, and then I get to the business of making art. And that, to me, is success. I may not have much money, but that, to me, is success. Like, not having to go to a place I don't want to go to every day, to do a job I don't want to do, to me, is really, truly the meaning of success. Ultimately, for me, success has more to do with personal happiness than it has to do with stability and wealth.
We only have about a minute or so left, but I do...
Well, I was born in a small town on the outskirts of Paris.
Actually, I was very curious.
Oh, God. All right, so really quickly. So last night, right, I have a strategy when I do shows.
Thank you, by the way.
I'm up till 4 in the morning, every night anyway, right, like 4, 5, 6 in the morning. So I go to a club or a bar whenever I always book the very first flight to wherever I'm playing because I'm awake still. Right? And then if I miss the flight, there's all these opportunities to rebook, right? So if there's traffic, weather, whatever, I can rebook the flight. So last night, there was this goth party going on in New York City. I grabbed my guitar, grabbed my suitcase, I grabbed everything I needed. I brought it to the goth club, stashed it in the DJ booth, and I was drinking and dancing and having a good time. And this couple came up to me, and this guy goes, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I don't understand. You're not performing?" I was like, "No." "Well, why aren't you being mobbed? Aren't you afraid you're going to get mobbed?" What are you talking about? And ultimately, this guy, in his mind, I'm like some huge celebrity, right? And I'm looking at him and I'm like, I'm having a drink in a bar. and I honestly, I think, tried for half an hour to explain to this guy, like, I'm a normal person. I make some things, and because I make some things, maybe I have like a modicum of, if you want to call it celebrity, a very small amount of celebrity, but otherwise I wake up, I work, I take a shower, I eat, I walk down. I'm not on Entertainment Tonight. And I guess there you have it. I have a friend who said, why don't you think you're famous? Because you're not on Entertainment Tonight? And I said, yeah, that's about right.
But you, and I won't get into it, but I will just say, but you have been called on to be, I don't know, reluctant, but at least the voice of a certain type of people over the years.
Which is a tremendous honor, especially, look, I love goth and I love goths, but let's face it, there's a lot of people out there who might have the wrong idea about goth, and even in the goth community, there's some people who might be trying a little too hard to seem scary. And so you get the wrong guy on Fox News to talk about goth, and you made their point that we're all a bunch of weirdos. So I don't think I'm a weirdo. I don't think we are weirdos. And so it has been like a tremendous honor when I am on like Fox News and stuff like that to talk about goth, because I can put sort of a friendly face on it and say, it's really not that different from being like a Pittsburgh Steelers fan. There's certain clothing that you wear, and there's certain events that you go to, and there's certain activities that you enjoy. That's pretty much the extent of it.
And just to wrap things up before anybody throws things at me, I will say you've definitely owned the philosophy of to thy own self be true. Is there any type of advice to anybody that who's looking to make a decision somewhere?
I mean, I think you just said it, really. I mean, ultimately, you can try to please the world, or you can try to please yourself. And if you try to please the world, you're going to be miserable. And then the great irony is you end up making everybody else miserable because you are. So it sounds dreadfully selfish, but if you make yourself happy and you pursue the things that make you happy, and listen, incidentally, one of the reasons why I'm happy at all is because I have a zero tolerance policy to anybody who makes my life miserable. So you show up in my life and you make me miserable, and it's like delete block. And I don't mean just on the internet, but in real life as well. I ran away from home. That is the ultimate delete block on your family. If people call you names, if they put you down, if they tell you that you're a weirdo, a freak, a faggot, a pervert, whatever it is, satanic, whatever it might be, then those people need to go. Those people are not helping you in any way. They need to go. And I say, jettison the cargo. And I ain't even gonna lie, I will jettison the cargo with the first sign of Corellian Cruiser. I'm just like, whoosh, just like Han fucking Solo. I'm like, it's gotta go. So, you have to be you have to be first. And it sounds dreadfully selfish, but if you don't put your own feelings first, there's no way you're going to be of any use to anybody else.
Vibes mean a big deal, so being happy, being the start of happy.
And before we both forget, I'm performing tonight!
I was there. That's right. So vinyl, right?
At Vinyl.
Vinyl, right down the street, so everybody knows where that's at. I hope you come out, VIP people, get into a little bit of a line. I think it starts from the beginning. There's an opening act. Sorry, I don't remember their name. It's something clever, though. Say it again?
Oh, yeah, that's right, The Tomb of Nick Cage.
Tomb of Nick Cage, that's right.
Whose music is featured on my show, Gothic Homemaker.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, and by Gothic Homemaker.
Gothic Homemaker.
So much.
Damn it.
All right, so what time are you expecting to hit the stage?
I have no idea.
Oh, there you go. It's a party, folks.
I think 9 or 9:30.
No, really?
Like yeah, I think so.
Oh, all right, we'll go with that. Check your local listings.
I could be
folks.
wrong. It could be 11.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well,
So are you. I had to, eliminate the glare. I'm staying at the Hyatt.
do you have any other?
666.
Do you have any other appearances throughout the rest of Pensacon?
Actually, not at Pensacon, no. To this and the show
Hyatt.
tonight, and I may try to bully my way into the vendors area tomorrow because I don't leave until like 3. So so if you cheap bastards don't buy all the merch tonight, maybe I'll be at the vendors area tomorrow. And I don't know how far. Well, Orlando's pretty far.
8 hours, 7 hours.
I'll be in Orlando next Saturday. If any of you are in the Orlando area, I will be performing at Gods and Monsters at their reopening. And then the week after that, I'll be at her house, probably for the weekend.
I hope that's not a broken sitting next to it. Okay. All right, well, yeah. Thank you so very much, everybody. Thank you.
So much.
You're great. Thank you very much. You get to meet your hero. That's cool.
Thank you, sir. You're very kind.